Next few weeks shaping up to be a critical ones for some major streaming companies like AT&T reported earlier today. We've got results there we want to talk about. But tomorrow is Investor Day for HBO Max. On Friday, we get the debut of Apple TV Plus. November 12th brings the launch of Disney Plus. For more on AT&T and media's big run, let's turn to Rich Greenfield. He is founder of Lightshed Partners, and Tom Rogers, who is the first president of NBC Cable. You look okay. You all right? Is it the end of cord cutting? I don't know. The beginning, it's going to accelerate, Rich?
Based on AT&T this morning, we're just getting started. I mean, AT&T had, I think they lost 1.3 million subscribers in a quarter.
Well, this would seem to be something that could accelerate, except all the companies that are involved are the cable companies, too. Some of them, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this is just a fundamental shift in consumer behavior. The idea of subscribing to a large bundle of channels when you can pick and choose your streaming service. Some customers may like Netflix, some may like HBO Max. They're going to, you're going to build your own bundle now, just like you build the apps on your phone. You're going to choose what you subscribe to. And the good news is no waiting for an installer to come to your house anymore. You're just going to click on and off what you like and what you don't like. And even companies like Comcast are now enabling it. I mean, Comcast rolling out a Flex box where you just bring your own, you get a device when you sign up for broadband, and it lets you stream all of the services that we're talking about that you're highlighting they're launching over the next few weeks.
You're going to have everything, Tom?
Of course. I'm going to take it all in. But HBO has a lot to prove tomorrow on this streaming announcement day, I should say AT&T. It's very unclear what the strategy is here. Verizon is now boxing them significantly by announcing that it's going to offer Disney Plus free to all Verizon unlimited data customers. And the big promise when AT&T announced this acquisition was somehow the combination of wireless with programming was going to create this unique combination that was going to propel both. Now, both seem to be either stagnating or in decline, and they have a lot to prove, I think, that they couldn't have accomplished this by just renting somebody else's content the way Verizon is versus a $110 billion acquisition where most of what they acquired is in secular decline. And it's going to be much more important than the individual shows they may announce tomorrow. What is the strategy of all this coming together?
How about AT&T? So they got, I'm sorry, how about Apple? They got enough to I mean, they had to undercut everybody else. And
Apple has more cash than everyone else put together.
They don't have enough shows. They don't have enough content at this point.
Do you think they end up buying a studio?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, well, we just had an analyst on 2 minutes ago who said he thought they were going to buy Lionsgate or
they're just wrong. Honestly, they're just wrong.
Buy 100 other things.
When you look at all of the tech companies, they're realizing that all you need is to spend money. Look at Netflix. They didn't buy a studio. Everyone said they were going to buy a studio for years upon years. They had to buy a studio to compete. The reality is when you actually just put cash on the board, talent is more than happy to work for you, especially when you provide a wide platform. And look at Apple. I mean, they're providing access, theoretically, to 1 billion devices around the world.
Whether you need a library. Look, there was a period of time where if you were a Netflix, you had a library. By default, you had a library. You were picking up lots of different shows, even when you didn't have original programming originally.
But remember, you're not paying for this service until the library starts to build. So you're starting with over 200 million people buy an Apple device. They don't have to pay for it. So you're just going to wake up and have this service for free. I think in many ways that's compensating for the fact that there isn't a library. It's also relatively inexpensive, even if you don't get it for free. So that's also compensating. But if you think about where the puck is going, right? The puck of the future is creating new original programming. It's not the catalog. I mean, I think that's part of the issue for Disney, why they're pricing low, is that they're really relying on catalog. They don't have a lot of originals. Apple obviously has no catalog. They're all betting on originals. These are very different strategies. But the ultimate goal of all of these services, look at Netflix. The goal is to make it as much about original programming and build their own library as possible. And if you look at viewership has shifted dramatically over the last several years towards original programming, and that trend is continuing. So I wouldn't bet against Apple simply because they don't have catalog.
I think
if the new shows are good, people will watch.
I think he hits a key point there. And you have to look at what AT&T just committed to Elliott Management to really put this in perspective. It is all about spending on original programming. I don't quite understand this number, but it looked like Warner had an 8.5% decline in program spend. If you're going to cost manage that company, it is going to be a very different beast when it comes to opening up the pocketbook for original programming relative to Apple, relative to Amazon, relative to Netflix. And it's very hard to see against that kind of environment where HBO, which has been around for 40 years and got to 38 million subscribers over that period of time, Netflix in less than 10 years got to 60 million subscribers. If you didn't subscribe to HBO because of Game of Thrones or Veep or Succession, is there something about adding Friends and some tonnage and charging $2 more that's all of a sudden going to drive HBO Max into offsetting all the secular decline of the cable networks?
You need a lot of content to stop churn, right? I mean, the single biggest killer of all of these streaming services is churn. You can literally cancel it in a second. What happened with HBO saw is that when Game of Thrones ended, people canceled. And all of us may like Succession. We have to give a shameless plug, obviously. But, like, Succession's a small show for HBO. They need more things to keep you from churning. And so I think the idea is with Netflix, right? You talk to somebody about Netflix, and there's like, oh, there's so much to watch. There's this and there's that.
Do you think this is for them, for the AT&T or for HBO, just a matter of trying to avoid decline rather than gain? Because I would tell you that John Stankey thinks he needs more subscribers.
Well, you get more subscribers by reducing churn, right? So if people churn out, they have lots of gross ads. Keeping them is the biggest problem. And
very interesting that at least I did not see in their earnings announcement that they indicated how many HBO subs churned after Game of Thrones went away. That's obviously a key number that they're going to have to speak to tomorrow.
I think that's the single biggest challenge facing streaming services is how do you prevent churn? Disney's doing it with a 3-year offer. They're even now offering an annual plan at a discount. Everyone's trying to figure out how they reduce churn. And I think if you looked at the HBO example, the strategy they're going to employ on the one side is using the AT&T wireless network and trying to bundle it in with AT&T like Verizon's doing with Disney Plus or T-Mobile does with Netflix. But then the other piece of this is going to be broadening the content so that there's something for the kids, there's something for, you don't always want a show that's like HBO. You don't want every single thing you watch throughout the day to be Game of Thrones. You look at Discovery, there's lots of other content that people watch. There's news, obviously. There's lots of other forms, and I think the goal is going to be to diversify HBO Max.
By doing what? By buying something else, or
by spreading the content? And so the content, they're going to take content that isn't all HBO dramas and comedies.
That, right?
It's going to be,
I always thought that would be the plan, though. I thought they were just using HBO as the signature name.
Yeah, I mean, think about Netflix. There's Marie Kondo and Tidying Up. There's documentaries. There's stand-up comedy. There's movies like Irishman coming. I mean, there's a real diverse set of programming. HBO, you wouldn't say that about HBO. HBO is much more of kind of a quality over quantity. And I think that's going to shift under HBO Max. I assume that's going to be the approach we're going to hear tomorrow. I think the big question, though, is how do you balance new versus old? Who's deciding inside of AT&T what goes where? Disney has this same issue, right? Like what goes into the theaters, what goes onto the cable networks, what goes onto the streaming services. Balancing these businesses, that is hard. And I think that's what all of these companies, you all are going to have the same issue when Peacock launches next year for NBC. These balances of new versus old are really intellectually challenging.
And if all HBO announces tomorrow is some discounted bundling strategy with AT&T, which they will announce, it really does beg the question, did they need to own a $110 billion company in order to accomplish that? And I think they got to come up with some more significant strategy for driving their service, driving wireless. The one thing that AT&T now has versus Verizon, which nobody thought a year ago, was a better 5G story. And if they can come up with some way that 5G combined with programming, combined with wireless, gives them some kind of new edge that maybe they've thought of and nobody else has, that would be significant. But other than 5G, you see a whole lot of challenge at AT&T with no clear path to any of those revenue growths getting better.
The good news is the consumer wins, right? The consumer's got more content at cheaper prices than ever before. I mean, everyone watching this is benefiting from massive investments in programming, really cheap prices, in many cases free. I mean, you already are a Verizon subscriber and you're getting Disney Plus for a year. I mean, this is awesome to be a consumer. Apple's free if you buy an Apple device. I mean, it has never been better to consume content than right now. It just makes it really hard on the legacy bundle.
Right.
Thank you.
Fun couple of weeks. Thanks. Thanks, Rich. I'm excited. Yeah, I need a
Apple Plus
program guide that includes everything. And with
You can pick and choose.
with stars of
Like
what I
a
really
TV
need.
guide?
Yeah, like a TV guide. You've seen everything happen in your life. I mean, you must feel
This
ancient.
is just like the networks when everything was going cable,
I know.
jumping in.
And
It worked out well for
CNBC
them.
launched a cable. Could we launch another cable network that's not around? And we did. And that
And
sounds
it
like
worked for the network.
The Stone Age, Tom. I mean, it's unbelievable.
The good thing was GE didn't catch NBC in the midst of this kind of secular
Right.
decline. That's a big difference for AT&T.
Thank you, Rich. Thanks.